Moving to our top story today. Next year marks 50 years, I didn't know this, since the very first South African television lit up. From SABC 1 and Mnet Open Time, remember that, to DStv, PVR, and Showmax, the local broadcasting space has painfully evolved over the decades. So, as MultiChoice celebrates its 30th birthday this week and the SABC gasps for air, we take a hard look at the local television industry's current situation. You may call it critical, but barely stable. And the best person to help us do this is our resident News 24 television trade journalist, Tinus Ferreira. Tinus, thanks so much for joining the lead. Fantastic. Finally, we get to have a conversation together.
Hello there. No, it's my pleasure.
Fantastic, Tinus. Let's begin with the SABC before we take a bit of a harder look at MultiChoice. And of course, there's been the Canal Plus takeover as of late, and it's been a massive talking point. The SABC, I mean, we've known for a long time it's hemorrhaging money. The latest financial report's just as bleak. Although some other mechanisms are getting healthier, there's still the losses are overriding any sort of revenue that's supposed to come in. You know, there's not many of us left who are reluctantly paying our TV licenses, are there?
You're right. No, I have to say that I do pay my one. I actually paid it again last month for the year because as a journalist covering the SABC, I cannot afford or allow myself to be called out for, oh, you're writing good stuff about us or bad stuff or whatever. And you're also a piracy viewer or a pirate viewer. So I do, but 85% of people are not. And I can't tell you how often I get messages from people in my family who end up at the macro on a weekend. We have another Black Friday coming up. And then they need someone with a valid SABC license in order to haul that flat screen LED TV out of the store. I get contacted and then I literally just say, no, I can't have 80 TV sets on my name because it's virtually impossible to get them off your name once you decide to emigrate or die or there's a robbery or something like that. So I have like about 3 TV sets on my name and that's what it will remain at. But 85% of people are not paying, and those are only 85% that the SABC is aware of. There's actually millions more TV households that they are not aware of, and they are really just basing that percentage on the households of their sort of very atrophied database of people that they know about. There's many more people watching DStv or just free-to-air ETV or whatever over the past 2 decades or so that the SABC has no idea where they are, and they're also not going to get their info anyway.
Right. So I've got the SABC Plus app, right? So that I know in good faith that I think I'm up to date with my with my TV license as it is. Maybe I have to pay this year's, but I normally pay every single year. But I'm going to be honest with you, Tinus, it's mostly because I've got OCD and I don't like my credit record being affected. And I've had debtors phoning me in the past, when are you going to do your account? And it was quite strict at one point. They were very irritating. And so me as Graham was kind of like, I really want to be up to date. I don't feel like owing anybody anything. That's just me. But there's so many people out there who goes, really? The TV license? I'm never going to fork out for that. Here comes along under the previous SABC administration, this SABC bill brought before parliamentarians. But then the DA's communications minister, Solly Malatsi, retracted that, saying and promising that there'll be new revenue streams that the SABC might be able to take upon other than, the usual TV license revenue collection. Where do we stand at the moment with that process? Has he begun that? And what other revenue streams could the SABC possibly entertain?
So often when I used to, I had to, in my young past, cover court and crime and things like that. And sometimes you go, it's so interesting also to see how people sometimes consume reporting. You go to court and people reading it, you just know they want you to almost narratively tell the story in terms of who's right, who's been wronged, and it's never really that clear cut. Like I've sat in court cases and I'm just thinking like, the poor judge, the poor magistrate, like neither side is right. It's almost like Solomon's baby in the Bible. Like, and I'm like, how on earth this person stabbed that person, but this person was abused. So who's really right or wrong in the equation? And in terms of this SABC bill is, I would say the current minister is more correct, but he's also been at fault. And then the SABC bill, how it looks, I feel like it was right to retract that because it's really utter garbage. It's not going to put the SABC in a better position. And if you read at the nitty-gritty in it, it's really preposterous proposals and nonsense that's in there. So it's correct, I think, for the minister to have withdrew that bill, but he's also been tardy and lazy in terms of not putting something else on the table already, and it's been months, almost a year. So you're taking away something that was proposed that's bad, but now there's just a void and there's nothing else being presented to replace it. So the SABC bill wants to establish like literally a second SABC. It's like we had stories in the past of the government because ESCOM doesn't work. We want a second ESCOM. I'm like, you can't even run the one now. You want another one. And the second one would be a commercial entity with its own SABC board with even less oversight than what the bad SABC currently has or gets. And then they want to turn stuff like SABC3 and some of the other commercial units within the SABC into like these very aggressive money spinners and things like that. So, and obviously much less oversight. And I'm like, why do you want to also appoint another board that you then also have to pay when you're already paying an existing board? So there's a lot of stuff that's bad in the SABC bill, and the minister should have, when he withdrew it, he's been tardy in giving Parliament or giving the South African public a replacement that is better sooner.
Right. It's similar to a certain extent, like as you say, the ESCOM unbundling. Although ESCOM's actually making good money these days. It's one of the latest headlines recently that its revenues now no longer in the red. The SABC loss, meanwhile, is around 250 million rand. Our News 24 business article today of our colleague William Breder reports that, and then, again, to speak to your fact that 85% of South Africans that the SABC knows about, as you say, continue to dodge TV licenses. There was this other sort of solve or possibility that SARS could potentially add like a licensing fee on top of a household levy in the way that it accumulates taxes. Do you think that could be a potential other revenue option for the SABC?
I think it wouldn't be like a specific line item, but the government will just somehow, like what happens in the UK with the BBC or what happens in Canada, the government just will have to sort of really take a long, hard look, and politicians don't want to do that, in terms of what do we want the SABC to be, because it's overextended. It's everything for everybody, but it's not being funded. So they'll just have to get a bigger lump sum of money from the government that's not paid over directly, paid over to a trust, and that trust decides how to disperse the money for the SABC, and just sort of get away from the very broken SABC TV license system that just doesn't work. Something else as well. So the SABC made a bigger loss from the previous year, as you rightly said, 253 million, but it's actually much, much worse. So they owe, and I won't make it too technical, but we have like another parastatal called Centec, and they are the company that distributes the actual signal. So the SABC will broadcast, let's say, SABC 1, and you watch your generations. They package and they compile and they send out that signal as a separate TV channel. But then there's another company that almost carries the water. They own the masts, like a Vodacom that owns the cell phone towers. And the SABC has to pay them monthly, and they owe Centec over R1 billion. But that's unpaid. So if you think of the balance sheet, it's just like a cumulative debt that keeps piling up and which they haven't paid. So if they, for instance, paid the 1 billion that they owed, the loss would be 1.2 billion. So the 2.53 million rand loss is not really reflective of the, and that on its own is already bad. It's not really reflective of what the real financial predicament and financial situation of the SABC really is. It's actually much, much, much worse. They just don't pay it, because the moment you pay it, it sits there like as a loss, as a massive loss.
Yeah, yet, and just to add to everything that you're saying, and there's 2 points that I want to make, and perhaps you can answer them for me like this. Let's go with Centec quickly. There is this move now, as I understand it, and I want you to explain it to me like I'm a baby, that essentially is going to open up more licensing for radio stations, for networks within South Africa. And we've never really seen this before. Tell me if I have that correctly or not. And just the other comment, just to add, and you can respond to this as well, Tinus, is the SABC has also come out and said it's no longer technically insolvent because it's now leaning on its assets. I wonder why it hadn't done that a lot sooner if it's only relying on the buildings that have been there since the darkest days of apartheid. Your comments on both of those quickly?
Well, there's a lot of things that they are not paying, and there's a lot of I think that's kind of more towards the creative accounting direction. If they really have to pay or repair or do the infrastructure or the replacement of technology and IT and their buildings and things like that, they really are in a terrible situation. So they actually said they need like another 1.4 billion rand to do just the basic content procurement and commissioning that they need to do. Then they need like another 3 billion just to do the real most urgent infrastructure repairs and upgrades to their studios and their buildings and things like that. So if they do pay that, there's no levering that against their assets, like the buildings and things like that. I'm sure they will not, it wouldn't look good on the balance sheet. It definitely wouldn't. Like, their lifts are more than 50 years old. They do not have the money to repair them anymore.
I heard this from a colleague.
Yeah, so they asked Schindler, and Schindler was like, we no longer have the parts. So now they're so desperate, they want to hire lifts. And I was like, how do you rent lifts? It sounds crazy. And now they have 2 buildings in Auckland Park. The tall one is the radio building, and the flatter one that you don't really see is like the TV building. And now CEO Nomsa Chibeli has said they're starting with the consolidation plan of moving basically 80-90% of the people working in the radio park building into the TV building, because the lifts and the infrastructure of the radio building is no longer working. So you have that building there, but it's not really a building that you can occupy or that's functional or that you can use. So maybe on the balance sheet it's like worth whatever, but if they were to sell it, somebody would say, well, I need to spend so much money to repair it or whatever.
Yeah. The Centec licensing? Just, in a nutshell, I mean, do I have that correctly, that essentially it's becoming more liberalized now, that more private players might get involved in this process?
So it's also it's like the post office or Eskom or AXA for the airports. It's still a government-owned entity, but they kind of parastatal, so it's almost privatized, but still government-owned. And it used to be, the signal distribution used to be part of the SABC, and then it was decoupled. So you're sitting with the Centec there, and they can obviously get private work or private contracts or clients. The problem is just that it hasn't really played out that way. Some companies like, let's say, eMedia, that as ETV or whatever, also uses Centec, but there's not enough other clients. The SABC is by far the biggest client of Centec in South Africa. And then now, because the SABC is not paying them, they are also deep in the red. And then they have, like, for about a year now, said they are on the verge, once again, also just kicking the can down the road, on the verge of switching off the SABC's transmission signals and things like that. So Centec is branching out a little bit. They've sort of launched their own streaming servers and things like that, but also not really going well there. And then obviously your biggest client is not paying you. So you're just falling further and further behind in money that you wonder where they're going to get it.
But is this an opportunity for, say, for example, Graham and Tinus have got a lot of money. We want to start our own little radio station and get a proper FM signal. Is this our opportunity now soon to apply for that? Whereas, those sort of signals were quite congested in the past. So there wasn't a lot of real estate, if you will.
They're also very expensive, though. So that's the SABC says it's too expensive, and the community radio stations and especially the community TV stations like Cape Town TV or whatever, they still have to pay Centec as well, and they just go like, the cost is exorbitant. We don't really have another option, and we really cannot, in terms of operating expenses, continue to pay for this. So. And then the minister was like, let's have a investigation in terms of Centec's pricing structure and things like that. And that's also still ongoing. So once again, nothing really ever seems to get to like a solution or a clear cut, like this is how this needs to change or whatever we need to do. So yeah, you can start up your radio station, but probably the majority of your cost is going to be paying for signal transmission and distribution.
Because Centec is in the red and because SABC is in the red and because there's not enough money to go around. Okay, let's move to this, right? Your latest opinion piece, it's on News 24 Live. It's entitled From Crown Jewel to Fading Star, DStv at 30 and the Decline of a TV Giant. So we're going to move now from the public sector a little bit to the private sector, if you will, and focus on MultiChoice, just taken over recently by Canal Plus. I know for a fact that the executives are in town. They're coming to see how local operations are being done here, and of course the staff at MultiChoice are upbeat about where they might go next. Take us through your journey, because in that piece, Tinus, you tell us, you might fob me off here, but you remind me of Mike TV from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You loved television growing up, something that spoke to you on a deeper level. And like us, we both didn't really have access to DStv off the bat of it. We'd probably hope for Mnet open time and time our channeling in for that. But for the most part, we grew up in SABC. Yeah, you beautifully narrate how you had grown up hoping to get access to DStv and buying those books just to see the new channel offerings that were offered by satellite television all those years back. Take us through that journey.
So it once again, I think, also shows you the consumer power of the youth or of kids, because I have these very distinct memories of altering where we would go for holidays as a family, because I would interrogate my parents and ask them, is there television there? And is there Mnet at, let's say, Port Alfred Sands? And if it wasn't there, I would make sure that we're not going to that backwater, back alley, really bad place. Meanwhile, it's like a beautiful beach, a beautiful coastal place or whatever. And I would just be like, you can all go to the beach. I want to sit at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, as you say, when it's Mnet open time. And I want to watch the Wonder Years and the Gummy Bears and all of these things that before this little window, literally and figuratively, is going to be ripped again away from me after the holiday. And I'm stuck with just public television, which at the time was also not bad. I watched everything that was on there. Yeah. But it was almost like this Christmas bauble of this potential and this promise of like, oh, there's more there that you just can't access. And then I think the arrival of DStv and Mnet was kind of similar to what podcasts like this is now, and what Netflix is, and what streaming services are. So, in a sense, MultiChoice and DStv got eclipsed by the new young kids on the block, and they kind of took their eye off the ball, did not maybe innovate and transform fast enough, and now they are, so it almost feels in a sense as if DStv has become the new SABC, because the SABC got eclipsed by DStv. They never thought it would happen. And now DStv is scrambling and trying to play catch up to streaming services and the podcasts that you click, like, and subscribe on YouTube's and the Snapchats and whatever, and the TikToks of the world. So yeah, it's just sort of like, you might be the king of the kingdom today, but don't rest on your laurels in whatever industry you is. That competitor that you cannot even conceive of or don't even sort of recognize as a competitor, similar to what the American broadcasters thought, what's this Netflix that sends DVDs in the post, never thought that they would be replaced, and that's exactly what happened. And I feel like that's a lot of what happened with DStv as well. And now we have these places like the SABC and MultiChoice with their DStv and whatever, sort of in a position of a identity crisis. They don't know where to go to, and they don't know how to get there.
You make the argument, and by the way, it's the 30th birthday of MultiChoice,
Yep.
correct? Yes. You make this argument, Tinus, that they got greedy. Take us through the bouquet options at the moment, because I could just speak vicariously through someone that's close to me that recently, well, not recently, a couple of months ago, ended their subscription to DStv, just because it's not cheap anymore. It's a very expensive budget line items in people's weekly and monthly grocery list. It's something that a lot more people are going, and especially older people are waking up to this idea. And we'll chat about IPTV, and I really want to get your views on IPTV before we end this discussion today. But a lot more people are going, I can do without SABC. And it feels like the common conception now is that DStV's only become for an option for devout sport followers. Your thoughts here?
So when I say that DStv has become greedy, it's not like a value judgment. I don't mean like, I now no longer like them or whatever. It's just me standing as a consumer before aisle 5, and I used to buy that chutney, or I used to buy this, and now I'm like, this one has become too expensive, or the coffee, and now I need to downgrade to what I can afford. Or maybe if there's a special, I'll still maybe remain loyal or whatever, but you kind of chased me away. And that's also sort of the good thing or the bad thing about being a monopoly. While you're a monopoly, you don't give people a choice. And the bad thing is, once people do get a choice, or even if there's no longer a choice, they'll just do without, or they're going to jump to the competitor. So
yeah,
that's what they did.
It's not a luxury, it's an exorbitant. You know what I mean?
A grudge purchase. So yes. For a long time, I felt like I really love paying DStv for what I'm getting. And like, I can see all of these things similar to Netflix. Like, I didn't, the SABC used to take so long before they would sort of show, like, I'm aging myself, but so like, I would watch Beverly Hills 90210, and then it's like, I already stood in front of CNA and read what's going to happen with Brenda and Dylan in the National Enquirer, and then it would take like another year before I would see it on the SABC, and suddenly Mnet came along, and it was like, oh, it's much quicker. The gap between the American broadcasting date and here is much smaller. And so for a long time, I felt like DStv gave me what I paid for. The other thing is, people don't mind paying for an expensive thing if you feel that you're deriving value that's equitable to that price. So a BMW is extremely expensive, but you do get leather stitching. You do get the luxury trinkets and bells and whistles, but don't make me pay a lot for KFC and then you still give me plastic cutlery. That's why we'll pay a lot of money to go to the restaurant because I get silverware, I get linen serviettes. But you're kind of taking away the value, but you're still asking me to pay a lot of money. And then I go like, I'm not going to buy the BMW anymore because you took away the leather stitching. And they thought they had the market cornered. Either you pay us or you go without, and then suddenly flourished up all of these streamers and competitors and YouTube and social media. So you're still on a screen. We still spend a lot of time every day on the screen. It's just no longer spending time with DStv.
How much are those bouquets at the moment? How much are they going for?
So the DStv premium one, where they also saw the biggest sort of decline in terms of subscribers, is well over R1,000. And I remember when it went over R1,000, I was like, what are you doing? You're going through a psychological barrier for people. At the moment, I have DStv Compact Plus, which is the second highest tier from the top, and that's 784. I don't really have the prices off the top of my head of then the DStv Compact and the DStv Family and Access and things like that. But it's really a lot. You can subscribe to a Netflix, a Disney Plus, Apple TV, all together, and it will still be
Prime.
less than DStv. Yeah,
Amazon
Prime. And you would get a lot of the same content minus the sports content. So there is obviously...
That's what I wanted to ask. Let's chat about that quickly, because that's what's keeping... Okay, let me ask this. Is it, from my very dim view, is it that MultiChoice and DStv as its prime offering remaining afloat because of SuperSport viewers and because of that very particular monopoly? Yes or no?
I would yes, not a dim view. You're absolutely correct. I would say the sports access that they still have exclusively, and then also sort of the channels like the Mzansi Magics and the Cake Nets, where they do kind of like localized genre content in vernacular languages like Xhosa, Zulu, Afrikaans, things like that for those markets, where people go like, this is really the only place where I can get my soap in Afrikaans or my soap in Zulu. So those two reasons.
Right. Because, okay, and now let's go to IPTV, right? Which is, you'll go to a friend's house, a lot of people have IPTV. Scallum. Is it criminal? What is it? People have big questions. Oh, I've got an IPTV service from Europe. They're never going to catch me. But in actual fact, there's been a task team set up to essentially crack down on these local IPTV operators. I think one of them is called Waka TV. There was a big case earlier this year. And there is still this conception, I think, amongst many people who are using IPTV, they won't catch me. They're after the oaks that are putting these services together, or they're, basically copying the channels from different satellite bouquet services across the globe and then creating mirror images of that for their localized service. To somebody who perhaps is listening to this for the first time, has never heard of IPTV, maybe just in a nutshell, explain it to them quickly, Tinus. I think I've done it some justice. And then secondly, it's really taken on in South Africa. And I think a lot of people don't know the sort of spin-off possibilities of being caught for what is essentially piracy.
I would say don't be worried about being caught. Be worried about you have given somebody else, and you don't know whether they're in Hong Kong or London or Fiji, your credit card details. And you might be on a holiday in the Bahamas where you switch off SMS notifications or notifications through your app, and then suddenly another transaction for 60,000 might be put through your account. So I don't understand how people, maybe I'm too OCD, but I wouldn't do that. Whenever I open my Facebook, and I wonder why the algorithm is suggesting that, because did I check out too much of these IPTV services? I'm being bombarded by a lot of them, and they are all obviously fake and false. And how they work is they steal the copyright content that really belongs to other places like a DStv or ETV or the SABC or whatever. and put it on their services, and then they, since they paid nothing for the content, obviously they can offer it for cheaper or for nothing. You just watching a few ads or whatever. Let's say you go like, oh, where can I watch I don't have Super Sport, but I really need to watch the Springbok Rugby this weekend. Google, and you find some site, and they show you some ads or whatever, but it is actually legal. And yeah, you need to be mindful of, are you actually, or are they downloading malware onto your phone? Who did you, if you pay, did you give your what personal details did you give, and financial details did you give? And if after a month nothing has happened and it seems safe, it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. A year from now, suddenly there could be like a transaction on your bank account or on your card. So yeah, don't do it. It is cheaper, and that's why it looks desirable and it looks great, but it's not the real deal.
But I've heard, because it is popular, right? Especially amongst middle class people who have a little bit more money that are looking to fill that gap of the entertainment part of their budget. But a lot of people complain, depending on whatever the service is, that they get to a point where they're like, oh, in the beginning, they're like, I've got 10 MTV channels. I've got CakeNet or whatever the case may be. But then after like a week or a month, suddenly the channels stop working as well as they did before. And people get frustrated, and then they leave the service and try and go somewhere else. There's that IPTV company, which is obviously illegal, has already made its money.
Yes, and it's kind of like exactly like Facebook or like social media. It's not like really there for you. You're the product, if you think about it. So the same with IPTV is like, or sort of like the romance online scams or things like that. It's people trying to see to what degree can they still leverage you and get money out of you before, as you say, the service might collapse. There's no service guarantees, there's no channel guarantees or things like that. So just because it seems cheaper doesn't really mean it's a better option. You're exposing yourself to liability in terms of financial issues or your personal data being on the interwebs and things like that. So yeah, and I mean, like, I don't have like a dog in the fight. I'm not, on MultiChoice's side or anyone's side. I'm just saying, don't do that. I won't do that. I was so shocked the first time I went to my one sister's home, and they wanted to watch something. And she's like, no, let me just like quickly make a payment to, I can't even remember what the name was, but it had like a turquoise background or whatever. I saw it on her phone, and I was
Does she know who her brother is?
Yeah, and I was just like so shocked because they just kind of like see it as this instant gratification. I'll pay 50 Rand today to just watch show X, and this place promises me that they have it. And I'm like, no, don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't type in your little CCV number there.
Earlier this year, there was that, as I said, the significant Waka TV case. And they actually found, I think, allegedly one of the ringleaders, Vuyisile Selem, I'm reading just off this quick article, and I've been following it for a while. The courts in Germiston managed to get him convicted of fraud, and he got a 10,000 Rand fine, or the option of 1 year behind bars. So it looks like the IPTV space is sort of being clamped down a little bit, rating it obviously out of South Africa. When it becomes more difficult, as I've previously alluded, is these services that are obviously multinational. They're across overseas, in Europe and whatever the case. Okay, my question now, because obviously I'd love to chat another hour with you, but we need to start wrapping up. But Tinus, SABC is not doing really well, but they've got the SABC Plus app. DStv still got Showmax, and it's got a lot of local offerings and offers a lot of filmmakers opportunities to be able to put out exclusive content, which is great. But they're still relying quite heavily on that super sport market side of things. We've got Netflix, and as you say, all of these other fantastic streaming sites, which have become the norm for all of us. Where does that leave South African TV of today? And let's maybe focus to end off with DStv. How do they sort of, with the Canal Plus takeover, what is next for them? For me, it doesn't look clear cut. I think we're just going to see more and more of a liberalization of the streaming media as we know it.
So streaming is the future, but what happened, and it's not unique to South Africa, it's actually happening worldwide. We've just, or MultiChoice or DStv has just sort of been cushioned towards its effect because of the high cost of data and data penetration and things like that. But now finally we've also seen sort of this trend of cord cutting happening here in South Africa and in the rest of Africa as well, where for decades we've had this traditional, how shall I say, functionality of how TV worked and pay TV worked, linear TV worked, where the production costs or the operating expenses would be X, and you could sort of make a lot of money in terms of Y by levering that content and charging subscribers to pay for that. Then come along the streamers, and they're much cheaper. People sign up, but in terms of revenue, they can't really make up the income of what a DStv has done or other pay TV services has done. So now you've replaced the old world with the new world, but the new world is not as lucrative, and the old world is subsidizing the new world, but the new world is sort of television is struggling to stand on its own. It is growing, it is chasing subscribers, but on their own, they're still hugely loss-making. And now you're sucking the money away from the existing linear pay TV, which is dying. People are cord cutting, and you're investing that money to make content for the new ones, further angering and causing subscribers to leave traditional pay TV. It's happening in America hugely. And now it's starting with DStv as well. So DStv is losing subscribers. They're not gaining that number of subscribers to Showmax or a DStv stream. So you're just sort of losing money all out. And the streamers are gobbling up. They have this intense need of a lot new content that's as expensive to make, whether you put it on the streamer or traditional pay TV, but there's not the money really to pay for it. So worldwide, there's this flurry of streamers. Your consumer is also saying, I don't want to pay for all of these gazillion apps and streaming services. And it's really only Netflix that is profitable. And all of the other ones are also rands, Amazon and Disney Plus or whatever. They're just funneling a lot of money into it, but they're not really making money out of it. But they audience hasn't all crossed over yet. So we're in this kind of like a no man's land. Streaming is the future, but whether we will be able to get it to a place where it's as profitable as traditional linear television has been is an open question. And like you said, sport and some of those general entertainment content that's still exclusive is sort of what keeps those people there. Once they lose that foothold on exclusive sport and things like that, and that migrates to streaming, we're definitely going to see a lot more subscribers leaving traditional pay TV and switching to, we already seen that happening in Australia, like they would secure cricket rights or tennis rights or things like that. And it's sort of like, once again, why I say DStv has become the new SABC. You used to watch Wimbledon or the Comrades always on the SABC, and then it just all jumped to DStv, and now they're sitting there, but I can just see them sooner or later jumping to streaming services.
Yes, like my friend the other day, I was in Joburg tennis, just as a side comment, where he was watching the Formula One qualifiers. So I said, oh, were you watching this? Do you have DStv Now or whatever the DStv offering streaming thing is? And he's like, no, it's the Formula One app or whatever. So you could just go through that. So in other words, you know, every topic or every niche industry or big industry will have its own, possibly its own streaming service, right? So if you're a diehard Formula One fan, you'll just go to the Formula One app instead of putting on SuperSport that perhaps had a bit of a monopoly within the context of South Africa, right?
And now we're waiting to see who's going to consolidate that. And maybe is it going to be the TV maker like a Samsung or LG or whatever, where they will sort of maybe swallow the overall cost of it, but because they have scale or volume, they will still be profitable to say, on our TV, we have all of those apps that you switch on. You don't have to go and subscribe to all of them, but if you kind of subscribe to us overall as Samsung or LG, we kind of give you access to any 5 or whatever. So like, maybe the TV services or some other company will come in as like an aggregator and say, you don't need to worry where that specific content that you're looking for is lying on which one of the apps. We have it all bundled again and kind of create a new bundle service in the way that DStv did, but with streaming apps. So, yeah, fascinating, because to expect somebody to now subscribe to 500 apps to get all of those little pieces of content is also not really going to work. So it will be interesting to see who's going to figure out the next step.
But I just want to end off on this, Tina's final question, just get your final musing on this. But at the same time, you know, you and I, perhaps in the middle class, I don't know what your finances look like. You know, we can afford the YouTube Premium, maybe Netflix, Disney Plus, whatever the case, and Spotify, whatever the case. A lot of people living in impoverished areas, townships, you still see the satellite dishes up for people's homes, whether or not that's through the government set-top box, OpenView, or DStv. In other words, you know, internet streaming, fiber is not as ubiquitous within poorer areas like townships. So people still rely on satellite dishes. And are we missing a beat there to end off?
The public broadcast is never going to go away. Your pay TV sort of like direct to home, like your DSTVs, are never going to go away. They kind of just get eclipsed by newer and newer technology. So your audience is always still gonna be there. Your audience that switches on a radio station and it's literally received by an antenna, by a radio standing in the kitchen or next to the bed, is always going to be there. It's just sort of like how technology evolves. And it's sort of like, but where the bulk of the content and the hot content or the good content and where the money is going to go to make content constantly moves to the newer, hotter sort of like girlfriend. So it's all going to be there. It's maybe like the on-ramp of like when I first got DStv. It's the same for that person who starts maybe with the entry-level DStv, or you buy your first TV set and you tune it and you get your SABC 1, 2, and 3 and ETV. And then as you sort of mature and grow, you level up, you buy more stuff. Once again, I'm old. I remember when I bought my first iPod and I was so excited. And you put your music on there. So all of these things are still going to be there. People still go back now to vinyls and people go back to cassette recorders and things like that. But that's not the primary mode that Lady Gaga is bringing out, or Taylor Swift brought out a new album. It's digital, so it's all going to be there, but the bulk of your consumers and your content consumers will definitely be eventually on digital.
Right, because it's similar with radio conversations these days. People go, oh, well, you still listen to the radio? Like, really? Like, yes, radio is still, in fact, some are arguing that radio is doing as great as it ever is in South Africa. People like to put it on in the car. Yes, we've got podcasts and all the rest, but there's that familiarization with radio that's also got that very similar sort of vinyl lasting appeal, if you will. It's just that je ne sais quoi, that little magic with radio that, of course, we try to replicate in discussions just like these on podcasts. Tinus Ferreira, he's probably South Africa's premier, best ever television trade journalist. He knows exactly what he's talking about. He hates it that I'm heaping praise on him right now. But if you want to read his musings on a multi-choice 30 years later, check out his article, From Crown Jewel to Fading Star, DStv at 30 and the Decline of a TV Giant. Tinus, baie dankie. Lekker dag verder. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Grant.
On the lead.
Thank you.